throughout the post-war period, these New Deal programs were expanded. And they were expanded in the 50s and the 60s. And of course, we're all very familiar with the war on poverty, which started in the early 60s. And the war on poverty continued the federal role. It continued to recognize that the economy really wasn't serving everybody very well.
There are men who cry out, we must sacrifice. Well, let us rather ask them, who will they sacrifice? Are they going to sacrifice the children who seek the learning, or the sick who need medical care, or the families who dwell in squalor? Will they sacrifice opportunity for the distressed, the beauty of our land, the hope of our poor? Time may require further sacrifices. And if it does, then we will make them. But we will not heed those who wring it from the hopes of the unfortunate here in a land of plenty.
In the 60s, the programs continued to expand because there was, it was a prosperous period and was a liberal political climate. By the mid-70s, this begins to change, and we start to, the economy starts to sag, and there starts to be the beginnings of deindustrialization, the beginnings of globalization, exporting jobs abroad, and the stake that the business community, for example, had in social welfare programs and the entitlements began to dwindle. One reason being that they didn't have such a great need for U.S. workers because they were exporting production abroad and using cheap labor outside the country. By the time Reagan gets elected in 1980, there's an all-out assault on the social welfare programs, and Reagan tries to, his goal to try to promote some economic recovery is really to transfer resources from the have-nots to the haves, redistribute income upwards from the bottom to the top.
I will ask the Congress to adopt specific measures to control the growth of the so-called uncontrollable spending programs. These are the automatic spending programs, such as food stamps, that cannot be simply frozen and that have grown by over 400% since 1970. They are the largest single cause of the built-in or structural deficit problem.
Now, at the same time, of course, Reagan was planning a military buildup. Brain trusters of the Reagan administration had a secret plan, later aired by David Stockman, that the resulting deficits, you cut taxes, you raise military spending, that's crazy policy, it's going to produce big budget deficits. But they had a plan, and the plan was to use the deficits and the politics of deficit reduction as a force against the social programs. But notice they repeated Reagan's trick. And the argument for the social spending cuts is in part reducing the deficit, even though they're simultaneously increasing the deficit with tax cuts for the affluent.
They are dismantling the welfare state. They are saying the federal government shouldn't be involved, that we have something called block grants, which is a new way of funding, and the money is going to go to the states, and they're going to run the program any way they want. And there's no obligation for the states to even provide something like AFDC or cash assistance.
The welfare warriors are fighting for women to have the same, rights for women and men and children who are living in poverty to have the right to lift themselves out of poverty.
I can tell you from my work with the Suffolk Welfare Warriors that there's a huge media blackout.
And so when we've gotten to a point on an issue where we've done the best we can with reason and courtesy and politeness, we then sometimes resort to direct action events, such as the one up in Albany.
I am a mother who spent 5 years cycling between low-wage work and public assistance. I worked my ass off to get off public assistance, and time again my child care fell through, or my child would get sick, and I was forced back on. What do we want? 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 What do we want?
came to Albany to sit down with some of the powers that be, people that have the power to make some of the changes that we're seeking, and to give them a little bit of a dose of reality. You send mothers to Workfare, JTPA, job readiness training, all these bogus training programs that they have, which is really nothing more than job security for social welfare professionals.
We're tired! We're cranky! We don't like the tacky! We're tired! We're cranky! We don't like the tacky! We're tired!
We organized because we realized that, everybody's got something to say about welfare and how it should run, except those of us that are most directly affected by living in it. We're all either current or former welfare moms. Some, like Beth, are working a couple of jobs, but still so poor that they get Medicaid and food stamps.
Roxanne has Medicaid paid by the state.